Alrighty, what's going on, my powerlifting people? Thank you for tuning in to another live stream, another form check live stream, that is. So let me check real quick before we actually get into the live stream and the form checks. Let me make sure the YouTubes and the Twitch are working correctly. And this allows also people to come in, all my millions of fans can come and tune in, make sure uh, they're in here before we get started with the live stream. But I just want to make sure that the program I'm using, Restream, is correctly sending it over to YouTube and Twitch. So it looks like YouTube is working correctly. And then let me check Twitch as well. Looks like Twitch is working correctly. Got all my fans in here. So we shall get started. If you look down in the description as well for the YouTube, you'll see the link to our Discord where you can come and join us, and then you can do the form checks and all that kind of stuff. Let me see if I can throw that in the chat as well. So you can use go down the description for the YouTube video, links there. If you're also on Instagram, you can go over to my Instagram. And again, that's also in the YouTube description. And in my bio, there's always the link there in case you want to check it afterwards. And also, if you're following King of Lifts, if you go to the King of Lifts link in the bio on Instagram, it's also there. So a few different ways that you can go and join our Discord. And that is where we do all our form check videos come from there. All right, so let me pull up also the Discord to show you. So let me share my screen over here. So here's our Discord, and we have different channels. So we have a general channel here where everyone just hangs out, talks about things. We have any questions as far as our app positions of power. So if you have any questions about the technical side of the app or about the actual programming of the app, and so then you can hop into these chats and ask any questions, get improvements as far as my strength book if there's any issues you're running into, and then also just asking questions about the program and how to maybe make adjustments for you as well if you need to make any specific adjustments. And then we have our King of Lifts chat. So in case you want to talk anything about King of Lifts, anything about like who you want on the podcast, what you thought about the latest episode, the fantasy leagues that we've done before for the classic, and we didn't get to do it for the equip, but Bill and I are doing our own separate one for equip, which I'm actually doing a live stream on this later on tonight, going over a little halfway recap of worlds. And so you can throw it all in there. And then we have our form checks and more channel where you can ask questions like general programming questions, general technique questions, if you need help with like gauging RPE, and then also the form checks we do. So people throw in their videos. Sometimes we give the text feedback, and then also I do these videos to give the video feedback so we can go a little bit more in depth into things. So let's scroll down and take a look at where we left off last time. So Critical J actually sent this Google Drive where I requested access, didn't let me in, but he has the YouTube link as well. So let's do the YouTube link. Let me pull that over and let's take a look at his lift on YouTube. So y'all can always use posting directly into the Discord if it's a small enough file size, but if it's too big of a file size, then in that case, you can go to Imager or YouTube or something like that, upload the video, and that way we can get to the bigger file sizes, but we can still like scrub through and pause and do all that stuff. Whereas Instagram is not quite as good. You can't scrub through the video if someone DMs it. Also, like when you pause, you get the big play button on there, so it's not as good. So we prefer this method right here. So as always, we try and start off with the setup, okay, the unrack and walking out for the squat to get into the position where you're actually doing the squat. So taking a look at that first, there's a downside to these type of racks, these like half racks, is that oftentimes it's either like too high or too low for the unrack. In addition, it's pretty far away from the center of the safety. So you can't do a small walkout because you could potentially, when you're leaning over in the bottom position, hit the actual rack itself with the bar or sometimes with the weights. I've had it before where these like weight pegs here are actually here. And actually, when I went down to the bottom of squat, the plate, the 45-pound plate, hit like the 5-pound plates that were on the peg. So you have issues like that. So in this case, for him, we're not necessarily gonna, go on the walkout as far as like, doing smaller steps, not walking as far as back, fewer steps, because unfortunately he has to walk back a little bit further than we would prefer here. And then also the unrack may not be as good if the height's not a good height for him. But here it looks like, decent height where, it goes like 3/4 the way up before it hits the other. It's not going to hit the other peg, but he's clearing the rack fairly easily. So looks like it's a good unrack there. And then he takes the first step back. In this case, he has to go kind of far back with the second step, maybe a little bit too much. I would maybe go to where this little line is here rather than coming all the way to the back. So potentially a little bit too far. And then you can see it goes a little bit more forward actually with this third step. So third step doesn't go as far back. And then he kind of goes forward a little bit again. So maybe an extra step, maybe he took that second step a little bit too far back. So if this step was a little bit shorter, then it'd make it easier to set the right foot, and then the left foot would already be ready to go, or potentially just a small adjustment. But overall, good walkout, good setup here inside the rack, inside the safeties. The only thing I noticed now here before he starts is we have this blocking the view and it's kind of baggy shorts, but it looks like maybe he has some soft knees. So a lot of times people are like, I don't know, worried or not thinking about something like that. And they're kind of like a little bit unlocked on the knees. And sometimes you even see them like kind of like bouncing, like they're soft on the knees. And what you have to focus on, especially if you're going to compete, is fully locking out those knees. So I think about flexing the quads and making sure the legs are straight. So then that locks out the knees, and then you would get the squat command, and then you start your descent. In addition, just from, if you're doing lots of reps, you're just sitting there kind of soft, then your muscles, your quads have to maintain that position. And so you're using your energy from your muscles to maintain that slightly unlocked joint and hold that position, because obviously gravity is going to try and push it down. But if you lock out the knee joint, then the force is going through more of the bones and the joints, and your bones are very good at handling compressive forces. So if you put, like, let's say 200% of your max or 300% of your max, and you just stood there with your knees locked out, you could probably hold it. It might feel really heavy in your back. It may feel like you're going to lose it, but you can hold it there because all you have to do is keep your joints locked out, keep your body braced, and the joints are going to be able to hold that force in that compressive state. Maybe even a lot more percentage than what your strength is at, the bones would actually be able to hold it before they kind of fracture or something like that. Whereas if you hold it just a little bit bent, a little bit soft, you're not going to be able to hold as long because the muscles have to do that work, and the muscles are not going to be able to hold it, and then you kind of just collapse. Let's go into the actual squat now. Pretty solid squat, goes nice and deep, holds his torso position well, holds the upper back position well, elbows kind of stay in line with the torso well. Looks like feet are well planted on the ground. And RP, yeah, 7.5 sounds right. When you're doing that kind of high reps, it may not be like the same feeling of like a 1 rep max feeling. It could just be like, you're slowly losing tightness, you're kind of losing your breath, and you're doing more and more reps and getting maybe a little sloppy, and then that's when the technique breaks down. And so just checking over on my chat, and I saw Matt Roddick say hello from Norway. So he looks like he's up late night watching my live stream. Hopefully y'all are doing well over there with the World Championships. We're going to do our little recap tonight of the World Championships, at least the halfway point. Some interesting results thus far. Let's go back to the first rep if we can. Let's just go down slowly. So here, does a good job of breaking at the knees and the hips at the same time, letting the knees track forward. Goes, below parallel here while maintaining the feet planted. Good torso position here that, fairly, you want to try and match things. So like the shin angle here is fairly parallel to the torso angle. And then the upper arm and the elbows here and the forearms are fairly well parallel to the torso. So that's typically like, more of a standard position where you wouldn't want it where like maybe the shins are like 45 degrees and then the torso is 90 degrees, or like the torso is 45 degrees and then the elbows are very 90 degrees. For some people, they do like the elbows a little bit higher, so that could be maybe more of a specific situation, but just kind of like drawing it out here for you all so you can see what I'm talking about is like trying to match this angle to this angle, and to this angle. So you can see how like they're fairly similar versus like if he had his elbows like way high like this. Some people do that, but it's not standard and it's like kind of weird. Or if for some reason like he was like really tipped over and his torso was like this, then obviously it'd be a bit unusual as well. So does a good job of kind of balancing things out as far as how far the knees go forward, getting down to proper depth, maintaining the torso position, and then coming out of the hole, maintaining those knees forward. Let's watch that again. Maintaining those knees forward, and everything is rising together. So you have the hips and the shoulders rising together and the knees tracking back slowly rather than something shooting up out of position. Overall, really good solid squat. As we've gone over in previous weeks in these form checks, overall, you all are doing a lot of things well. C plus, B plus, A minus, depending on what level you're at, but no one's failing over here. We're just talking about minor things here as far as like making the walkout more efficient or, locking out those knees at the beginning of the end of each rep, especially if you're going to compete in a competition. And then another minor thing here as he's going through his reps is making sure you're keeping that back tight. All right. You're keeping your bracing of your abs tight, and then you're trying to pull the bar down in your back. A little bit of pulling the bar down the back on the low bar is going to contract the lats, like you're doing a lat pull down. When you're contracting those lats, you're keeping that side tight as well. And that pulling down holds the bar in position so it doesn't roll up. So if we look at some of his reps here, as he's going to come out of the hole here, it goes forward a little bit. So he does have his elbows turn up a little bit, and also the bar kind of rolls up a little bit. So here's where I'd focus on trying to keep those elbows down in position, trying to keep the upper body frozen, locked in place. All you're moving is the lower body, and then thinking about pulling that arm down to counter the idea or the natural tendency to throw the elbow up and push forward. So if we watch this again, let me see if I can even do it slow mo. And let's watch this next rep. So here the elbows are down in a good spot. Here the elbows shoot up. And on that one, the bar didn't go as forward as much. Let's take a look at the next one. Elbows come down in a good spot. And then right there, you can see the bar went forward on a little bit. So it kind of went from like a low bar to like a mid bar position. And then here he pulls the elbows down again. And right there, you can see how it went forward again. Kind of like right there. So it's a little bit hard to see with the motion blur, but kind of right there. You can see how it goes forward a little bit. So you want to minimize the movement of the elbows during the lift. You're trying to move the knee joint, the ankle joint, and the hip joint to work your quads, your hamstrings, your glutes. You don't want to be moving the elbows down on the way down and up on the way up, because now you're messing with your upper back tightness and you're messing with the bar position. But overall, great squats. So those are, again, just to review, those are minor things I'd work on. Is 1, trying to make the walkout as efficient as possible. 2, making sure the knees are locked out at the beginning and the end, especially if you're someone who wants to compete or you do compete. You don't want to have that bad habit. And then 3, focusing on that upper back tightness of keeping the elbows in place and pulling the bar down onto the back. So one of them is during the actual walkout, one of them is during like your final part of your setup, and then one is during the actual squat itself. Other than that, everything else looks good as far as the stance width, knees tracking well, depth, torso angle, all that is great. RPE looks good as well. Let's take a look at what we have next. I'm going to take a little water break. You got to make sure you stay hydrated as a powerlifter. All right, let's go down and see who else we got. So we got another video here that was previously submitted last week. And so let me see if I can pull up the video real quick from last week. from her first time ever doing sumo. Oh. So here's the first time doing the sumo. And as it's going, the main thing I just went over is that trying to focus on whether she can push the knees out more to be in line with the toes, and also that allows the hips to get a little bit closer to the bar, get a little bit more upright. But that potentially some people just aren't well built for sumo, that you may not have the mobility, you may not have the hip structure to be able to drive the knees out that way without causing some kind of impingement or even some kind of pinching or pain. And so that some people will just naturally have this issue where their knees are caved in a little bit, and you have to just see whether you're strong enough that way, or you have to just stick with conventional, which, like I mentioned in the previous form check as well, that like there are some tendencies of, you know, heavier weight classes going more conventional, lighter weight classes going more sumo, equip lifters going more sumo, um, you know, male lifters, which matches kind of with body weight since males tend to weigh more, maybe more conventional. And so there's little tendencies like that. And so in this case, maybe conventional is best for her, or if she continues to practice, maybe sumo will be stronger. It just won't be like that picture perfect technique that some lifters have. So now let's take a look at the next one. And let's see if we see any differences or any improvements. So it looks, about the same. It's going to be tough when you're learning some kind of new movement to make like instant improvements. So this may be something that takes, multiple sessions, which could then take multiple weeks. If you're only doing it once a week, or even if you're doing twice a week, it could take multiple weeks to try out different things and maybe even mess a little bit with the stance width and the toe angle and seeing how it feels. But just like initially looking at this, let me see if I can pause it in the right spot. So as she goes to pull, so here's kind of where she's trying to pull from. So you can see how we still have, it's not major, but it's not like, picture perfect, where we'd want the knee, if possible, a little bit more this way. Something like that, if possible. And sometimes what I do is, like, if you have someone in person, is they can, like, while you're here in position, before you actually go pull, they can go and like push on the knee and try and push it out to try and give that feeling to that person of like, this is where it should be, and seeing if the knee actually goes into that position or not. The other issue here is once she starts initiating and starts contracting the muscles and pulling, the knee collapses in a little bit. So right there, you saw how it just came in, and then she goes into hip shooting back a little bit. And so she's in a little bit more of this position when she pulls, and you can see the knees are in a little bit more. So it's like the difference between there and there is where the knees come in. And then the hips coming up a little bit too. So potentially as the weight gets heavier and heavier, she's going to have this issue where the knees are going to come in more and more, and the hips are going to go up more and more. So again, just have to keep hammering it out, keep focusing on getting as tight as possible in that bottom position, getting those knees out, potentially messing around with pointing the toes out a little bit more to give some more room for the knees to go out. And then just continuing to focus on hammering away at the technique and getting stronger in the hips to see if it's a viable option. If not, then going back to conventional. Because like this position here is, it could still potentially be strong, could potentially still be stronger than conventional, but it's not as an efficient position here, with the knee being in, the hips being farther away from the bar, so it's going to make it more difficult, and trying to use a little bit more of the like adductors here, and even a little bit more of the quads, to overpower the movement, and then the hips being further away and torso being tipped over. But Other than that, like, the rest of the pull looks good as far as, looks like the bar's not too far forward. The lockout looks pretty clean. The knees are locked down and the shoulders are back at the top. And even with that final rep, looks like there was a couple more reps in the tank there. Definitely 2 more reps in the tank, maybe 3 more reps in the tank. So there's still some room to not only progress in the weight to make it more difficult, but also right now it's a light enough weight to continue to focus on that technique. So it's just continue to focus on whether the knees can go out. Maybe someone comes and helps and pushes on it to show, hey, this is where it should be. If not, maybe focusing on a little bit of the toe angle, seeing if putting the toes out a little bit more, gets the knees out a little bit more, and then really focus on keeping it out and not having it collapse in during the pull, especially with the lighter weights. Because if, like, let's say the last rep is RPE 7.5 or 8, well, then like the first rep is going to be RPE 6 or sub 6. So you should be able to maintain the good technique at that low of an RPE. And I think the next one we have here is one we were just discussing here with Jay. He's got his pre-competition paranoia kicking in, and so he wants to make sure if these past competitions standards. So let's click on this. Let me bring this over. So let's take a look at the squat first. Got my poverty internet. All right, let's make this 1080p, maximize it. Let's take a look at this squat, see if it would pass NA competition. Take a look at all of it first. So it looked really solid. Let's go back here and let's break it down into the walkout and setup first. So pretty good unrack right there. And then takes his first step here, sets up a second foot, sets up the right foot, boom, ready to go. So that's very efficient unrack and walkout. There he locks out his knees. So at this point, he's in a good spot to get the squat command. So tried to get the bottom position as best I could. So if we take a look here, the way I try and do it for the top of the knee, like when a still shot like this, I try and use the back of the knee actually as a guide, because like the back of the knee here where that crease is kind of goes to where the center of your kneecap is. Now that's not the top of the knee, but that kind of gives you an idea of, okay, the center of the kneecap is here, so the top of the knee is going to be somewhere a little bit higher than that. It's not going to be where like the top of the sleeve is or like the middle of the quad, like some people try and like, be like, oh, look how high the quad is, or look how bent the angle is, or look at the hamstrings touching the calves or something like that. So my idea is I try and come up from the back to the top of the kneecap, and maybe you say, okay, somewhere around there is going to be the top of your knee. Obviously, there's some thickness to my dot on my line here, so that's going to throw it off a little bit. But let's just go with this, and then you come across, and let me see if I can actually trying to see if I can make that thinner, but I don't think I can on this app. So we'll stick with that. So that would be something like the plane that's the top of the knee. And then you can kind of see the hip crease here. I know it's a little bit small. We're not going to be able to necessarily see it perfectly, but It's going to be somewhere right around there. I'll make it bigger so you can kind of see this area is where we're looking at. So now if I take those off, you can kind of see. And if I take this off, you can kind of see how the leg right here goes into here. And so the hip crease is going to be somewhere inside there. And so even from those two dots, you can kind of see how it's below. So depth looks good as well. And then as we play the rest of it, came up fine. If I take a look at the RPE again, it depends on how much he can grind out because there's a little bit of a struggle. So here comes up, gets stuck a little bit, and then goes into lockout. So it depends on that slow portion here, how much more he can push through. So potentially, if he can really grind out through that part, it could be an RP8. Potentially, if he can't, and maybe goes more and more forward as it gets more and more weight and more difficult, then potentially that could be an 8.5. So, especially if he's a little bit concerned and stuff, I wouldn't put that as the opener. Maybe you go like 160 as the opener. So let's just run some numbers too, just because we have a little bit extra time here since we don't have as many videos submitted. Is let's say a little bit more difficult than an 8. So let's say it's like an 8.5. So let's say we're trying to go to 175. What I try and do is take 2.5 kilos less than that. So let's run our percentages off of 172.5. So then I go like somewhere around 92% as the top end. So that gets you kind of close at 160, I was saying, maybe even 157.5. And then somewhere around 97% is where I do the top end of the second attempt for 167. So potentially he can do 157.5 as the opener. If it moves well, you go 167.5 as a second attempt. And if that moves well, then you go 175 for the third attempt. So you're doing a 10 kilo jump and then a 7.5 kilo jump. If you want to tighten it up a little bit and you're more like comfortable with your attempts, then you could potentially do 160, 167.5, and then 175. And if in either case, if for some reason the 167.5 is difficult, you pull down to 172.5 as like a option B for the third attempt. So that's why I say the 165 is a little bit heavy because now you're getting close to a second attempt. And if there's any issues where you cut depth a little bit or you struggle a little bit, then maybe you make the second attempt and then you don't have nowhere to go for the third attempt. But as far as it passing a competition, looks good to me, looks very efficient, looks like ready to go for the competition. So let's take a look at the bench press. It wasn't loaded before, but it looks like it's loaded now, so I don't have to download it. Okay, looks like it's 720p for now. So we'll take a look at that. So that looked really solid as well. If we take a look as far as the setup looks great. These benches suck as far as being slippery, being low. There's cracks in it. It looks like he has the shelf liner to help a little bit, but still, like sometimes maybe your butt doesn't sit exactly where you want, or if you're moving too far down, then your shoulders don't sit where they want. So these benches suck, but bench was still good. So that's why I feel comfortable that this is going to pass the competition. Like this is a good starting position where the head, the shoulders, and the butt are on the bench. The feet are clearly flat on the ground. Elbows are locked out. Thumbs are wrapped around, gripping the bar. This is good. Gets to start command. Brings it down nice and controlled. Touches low on the chest. Elbows are stacked underneath the bar. And gives a good pause right here. More than probably what he's going to get in a competition. And then drives it back up. Elbows are locked out. Everything stays in position. If we watch again as far as like the butt, if we just focus on that during the press, looks good. If we take a look at the speed, so again, a little bit struggle coming off the chest. So again, it depends on how well he can grind out more difficult weights and whether like maybe has a bad tendency if like the butt comes up or lifting legs up or anything like that. But you can see a little bit of struggle here, a little bit shaking. But other than that, really good pause. Probably be a little bit faster in competition and moves well. So if we take the RP8 in this case, let's pull back up our handy dandy calculator. So if we do 110, we're looking at about 120 as the top end. So if we run it off of 117.5, we're looking at 107.5 or 110 as the opener. And then second attempt, somewhere around 112 or 115. So you can see with these percentages, the lower the max is, it gets a little more difficult because you're falling between 2.5 kilo attempts. And so the percentages start to break down a little bit. So that's where you have to then use yourself and figure out appropriate jumps, where you're going to go 5 and 5, 5 and 2, 7.5 and 5, and so on. So in this case, maybe if you wanted to go more conservative, you would do like a 107.5 jump to 115 will give you a 7.5 kilo jump, and then from 115 you can go to 120, which would give you the 5 kilo jump. So something like that would make sure that you have a conservative opener on the 107.5, and as long as the press commands are good and everything flies, you jump to the 115, and then from the 115 it still gives you some leeway to take 117.5 or 120. If you went from 107 to 112, you're only doing a 5 kilo jump. So at that point, really, you should only go 115 or 117.5. So then it leaves out the 120. But if for some reason the 107 was difficult, then it would make sense to go 112. And then if the 112 is difficult, you take like 115 and call it a day. But it looks like with the really good pause and everything staying in position and moving well, 107.5 to 115 to 120 would be good attempts. And again, everything here is passable, looks great, not going to be an issue in a competition. And finally, let's take a look at the deadlift. So deadlift looked great as well. Wearing his long socks, wearing a singlet, taking his time with his setup here. Did a good job there of pulling the slack out, getting in a good position as far as a vertical shin. Hips are nice and high. Shoulder blades are directly over the bar, so you don't have anything really shooting up, coming out. Once he gets past his knees, locks out his knees, brings the hips through, shoulder back. Knees are clearly locked out, shoulders are clearly back. No issues here. Hold at the top, brings it down. It's a perfect lift. And this may have been the easiest one of the three where there's no real slowdown, especially off the ground, since with sumo, a lot of people are, slow to break it off the ground. Like there isn't too much struggle here to get off the ground. So looks like a solid RPE8 there, would pass in the competition. So if we take a look now what the max would be, somewhere around 200 would be a nice little 200 kilo barrier if he hasn't done that before. So again, just to run some numbers for you all, in case you're wondering, I take the 2.5 kilos less. Top end for first attempt would be somewhere around 180 or 182.5, and then top end for the second will be somewhere around 190 or 192.5. So you could do a more conservative way where you're taking bigger jumps and go 180, 190, 200. Or you can maybe tighten it up a little bit and go 182.5, 192.5, 200. So that way you're going, 10 and then 7.5. So that the 192.5 may give you a better gauge of whether the 200 is possible compared to maybe the 190. You take a 10 kilo jump from 180 to 190, you're not sure if you have another 10 kilos from 190 to 200 unless the 190 really flies. And then maybe you could do like a 190 opener and jump 12 and a half, or sorry, 180 opener, jump 12 and a half to 192, and then jump 7.5 to 200. But potentially that jump from 180 to 192 could just feel really heavy in the hands and kind of like scare the lifter. And they may scare the lifter and be like, oh man, that felt really heavy. It was difficult. And then they go more conservative on the third, like, oh, let's just take a small jump. Let's do 197.5. And then the 197.5 feels fine because now they're taking a smaller jump from 192 to 197. So you also want to be careful about spacing it out too much. So I would really go 180, 190, 200, or maybe 182, 192, 200, especially because the 185 is very clean and move well, no issues. Maybe 182.5, 192.5, and 200 would be the way to go. Yeah, no problem, man. Very, very clean lifts, very technical. You're taking your time, you're setting up properly, you're executing everything, you're pausing more than you need to. So everything is well prepared. And so, yeah, those would definitely pass. And right there around RP 8, maybe 8.5 for the squat. And then that's great that they're already lifetime PRs. So that means you could potentially go a little bit more conservative in the competition. You don't have to go full RP 10 and maximize every single attempt. You can leave 2.5 kilos in the tank because you're going to be hitting PRs along the way. You're going to put a PR total together. And if you leave, let's say 2.5 on squat, you hit exactly on bench, and you have 2.5 kilos left on deadlift as well, you save those for the next competition. So a little bit extra that you can get going forward. So you don't have to maximize everything because you push too high, you get too close to the sun, you're going to get burned. So if you try and go for like a 202.5 or 205 deadlift, you may miss and then you're stuck with like 195. Where if you play it more conservative, you take the 200, you call it a win, lifetime PR, and then you save the 202 or 205 for the next meet. So looks like you are in a really good spot going into the competition. And like I said in our chat as well, that if you're going to practice your openers more again, you can always do multiple singles. So if you do like, let's say 3 singles with your opener for all three, then you really got a lot of practice. You know you can hit it. You feel comfortable with it. If doing 3 squat singles at your opener in the gym concerns you, like if it's going to get too difficult or you're going to fail or like that, then that kind of gives you a hint that maybe they're too heavy. Because in a competition, you're going to have to go more. You're going to have to do your opener and then one more and one more. So you should be able to hit, 3 singles at your opener, even like 5 singles at your opener with enough rest in the gym to really hone in everything and be ready to go. So looks like you are good. There's nothing to be concerned about. Just to throw in there here too is some of our discussion, even though it wasn't exactly the exact discussion here, is I'm trying to pull it up. I thought I threw I guess I didn't, the link didn't go through on here. That's weird. But basically, as far as people who want to compete for the first time, in this case, he's not competing in the first time, but for someone who wants to compete in the first time, the sooner that you compete, the better. Like the more people drag it out, like, oh, I need to wait till I hit X number. Then they get to X number and they gotta be like, oh, I gotta wait till I get Y number now because I saw this person do this. They get to Y number, they always have another reason to not compete. Then those people keep pushing it back and back, and the paranoia and the stress goes more and more until they finally don't ever compete. So the less stress, the lower your numbers are, the better. In this case, he's competed before. He's stressed about being in the open division because normally he's done university competitions. So at Dome is like, just don't worry about what other people are doing. Focus on your own numbers. It's your first time in the open. You already hit these all-time PRs in the gym. You're going to hit some all-time PRs in the competition. So just focus on, okay, I'm going to beat my previous numbers, hopefully by this much, this much, this much, and then go from there. Don't worry about, oh, I need to beat this person in the open my first time, or I need to get top 3 or whatever like that. Who cares what anyone else is doing? Who knows who's showing up, what numbers they have? You can't control them. You don't play any defense. Just focus on hitting your own numbers. And then he's also saying here, have you got any advice on gauging how lifts feel when I'm on the platform? I always struggle with mock meet to match how the lift feels like with how it moves, so I misjudge my next attempts. I mean, for a lot of us, it feels heavier when you're actually doing the lift. So you do, a heavy squat and you film it, and you're like, man, that felt really hard. I felt like, RP 9 or 9.5. And then you watch the video and you're like, hey, it wasn't that bad. It was more like a 8.5 or an 8. So it can be difficult to gauge your own RPE and the difficulty while you're doing the actual weight in the competition, and you have the judging and everything going around you. So that's when it helps to have someone who's handling you, who has experience, and they can watch your lift from a third person perspective and be like, hey, that moved very fast. That looked like RP8. We should go to this attempt. And so it helps to have someone there. If you don't have someone there, potentially you can have someone that films for you, or you put like your phone on the scoring table and film it. Then as soon as you finish your attempt, you come over, you watch the video real quick just to see if it's like half an RP easier than you thought, and then base your attempt on that, because you do have the 60 seconds to put in the next attempt. So you can do that, quickly watch the 10 seconds of a lift, or even 5 seconds if you just scrub it down to just watching you come up from a squat or pushing from a bench, whatever, and then decide on an attempt. If you can't film and you're by yourself, then that may be just more reason to play it more conservative. So if it feels heavy underneath when you're doing it, maybe you pick second attempts that you can hit no matter what. So okay, I can hit a whatever 117.5 bench press regardless. So you're gonna open up with your opener, which you can hit no matter what. You're going to go with a set second attempt that you can hit no matter what, and then go more conservative on the third attempt. So you can say, hey, the second felt heavy. I'm not sure how much more I had in me. I can't watch the video. I'll take the more conservative third attempt and make sure it's something that's 2.5 kilos or 5 kilos below what you think the actual max is, because you just don't have the assistance there. So that's kind of like the way I do it. Like if I'm sending a game plan to a lifter of mine and I'm not going to be there to handle them, then I can't adjust up or down the day of based on how they're feeling, because I'm not there. And potentially they may not have someone who's experienced there who knows how to like change an opener or change a third attempt deadlift or kind of gauge RP. They may just have like a friend or family member that helps load their weights for them and kind of just like carries their sheet for them. So in that case too, I also have to go a little more conservative, because I can't predict if they're going to overperform or not, and I have to watch out if they underperform. So in that case, I may go a little more conservative with my numbers on purpose when I give them the game plan and say, hey, if you can pick between 3A and 3B based on how you feel from the second, go ahead. But both 3A and 3B, I plan on being a little more conservative than if I was there. So just some downsides if you don't have help or if you can't film or stuff like that. Over time, you may gain more experience of being underneath the bar for the attempts in the competition and how it feels to you, and making that kind of adjustment and making the right calls if you do have to always coach yourself. So hopefully that helps out. Trying to see what oh, there we go. Thanks for the help. I didn't realize that the discussion was in the programming group and not in the form check group, because they were talking about programming and mad cows and 531 and our position of power. Someone wants to switch over, and then the discussion also was like, oh, I'm not strong enough to compete. So I did actually recently put a video. So if you're on my YouTube channel, you can check out the most recent video there, where I go through this whole idea of people wanting to wait till a certain level of strength, or until they can beat a certain someone before they sign up for meet. And what tends to happen when those people, when you do see them post that kind of stuff on Instagram or Reddit or where like that, is you end up seeing they just never compete. They just kind of disappear and they never do the competition because they're never good enough. And I understand people's thought process, but through my experience, I'm hoping I can show them how the thought process is not like perfectly logical, and actually the opposite helps, because if you have lower numbers, like my first competition, if we go in pounds, I did like a 259-pound squat weighing like 180 pounds, like a 117.5 kilo squat. Whereas now people are doing like 230, 250 kilos, like 500 plus in their first meet at that body weight. But for me, there was no stress. Like, I'm doing a 250-pound squat. Who the hell cares what numbers I'm doing? Who cares whether I make or miss these weights? No one's watching. No one's paying attention. I'm a nobody. So less stress for me. I just go in, I do my lifts, no one's paying attention, easy weight, and I build from there. But if you're going into your first competition like a Ray Williams, and his first meet, he's doing an 800-pound squat, and everyone's like watching to see, oh my God, this guy's going to be going for the world record soon. That's a lot of pressure. And his first competition, he's up jumping the commands and missing those attempts. So I would rather go when there's less stress, when it's like a smaller competition, when there's maybe a beginner specific competition, when I have lower numbers, when I'm not concerned about what other people are doing, and then it's easy. You just go in and having fun. You're doing your numbers. So it's always an interesting logic. Like if you try and apply to like other things, like again, I sometimes talk about like, driving as far as like, pushing a car and stuff like that, as far as getting tightness. But also you can think about like, let's say you're trying to get your driver's license and then you want to go like down the street, go to the grocery store or go to the movies, something like that. Are you going to be like, oh no, I'm going to wait until the level of a NASCAR driver, or I can drive a Formula One car before I go drive to the supermarket? And it's like, no, you learn on a closed course first, you get your license, then you start driving around in your neighborhood in small places and gaining that experience in lower stress environments, going slower, and then you build up going onto the highway and things like that. So same thing here. You get your membership, you sign up for a competition, put yourself in a low stress environment with lighter weights when you are weaker, get that experience, and then you can build up from there, doing more competitions with bigger weights and going to bigger competitions, state championships, national championships, that kind of stuff. So you can kind of watch me break that down a little bit further in this video too, for anyone who is interested. And as always, with any of my videos, you can always comment on there if you want me to talk about another specific topic like that and kind of break down my ideas and thoughts. You can always throw a comment in those videos. I answer all the comments, and I usually take notes and mark down some good topics that people have so that then I can turn those into videos as well. So it looks like that's what we have as far as our foam checks. Just to throw in there too, going back here to the discussion as far as this lifter who I was talking about doing a competition, Simsoyu or Simsoyo. Sorry if I messed up your username, but he was talking about, progress he's made on mad cows, going from like, 107 for 5 reps on squat to 132 for 4 reps, and then the bench and the deadlift and everything like that. And you're just looking at as far as switching programs. So the mad cows is more of like a linear progression. So you can see it right here. For example, if we just look at the squats, you have Monday 1x5, Wednesday 2x5, Friday 1x3. And over here, it says, remember 1x5 stands for ramped up sets, 4 sets of 5 with weight increasing. So it's not that you're just doing one set, that's kind of like the top set, and you're doing other sets of 5 building up. So you might do like, 100 kilos for 5, 105 kilos for 5, 110 kilos for 5, and then like, 115 kilos is your top set until you reach that last heavy set. So and then here also Wednesday is obviously supposed to be a lighter day recovery, and then Friday is supposed to be your intensity. But the idea of this, even though it's undulating reps within a week, is that you're trying to like add weight to the bar each week. So if you got to like 115 kilos for 5 on Monday, next time you try and get to 117.5 for 5, then the following week 120 kilos for 5, and slowly build that way. So that's what this lifter has done to get to this level. But at a certain point for pretty much everyone, they're not going to be able to make that progression. So then it's like, okay, do you progress every other week, or do you progress every month, or do you progress until you become elite level, where like for Ray Williams to put maybe 2.5 kilos or 5 kilos on a squat, it takes an entire year of training just to make that progress. So you have to, expand out that linear progression further and further as you become closer to your peak level numbers. So in this case, maybe mad cows is no longer working, or it'll work less and less, getting diminishing returns. So I think he said he did it for 8 months from March until last week. So yeah, about 8 months right there. And then he's looking to switch to our program. So the difference with our programs is we're looking more at the entire training cycle. So if you're doing like a 16-week training cycle, we're not trying to increase the weight with the same number of sets of reps like this every single week. We're potentially undulating reps, undulating sets, and undulating the weight in order to manipulate the volume and intensity what we want for the entire training cycle. So farther out from, let's say, your 1 rep max test, let's say for 8 weeks, you're focusing on increasing volume at more of a moderate intensity level. Then you transition, and during transition, you may start bringing down the volume, bringing up the intensity. And then when you're going to do your 1 rep max, you go into a peak where you're building up the intensity and bringing down that volume to a more moderate level. Then you give some rest days and you do your max. So in that case, you're manipulating these variables to induce certain fatigue that you want, and then allow your body to recover, and then potentially closer to competition, induce a different kind of fatigue with a higher intensity to get the progress that you want. And you have to look more in those cycle to cycle progressions in order to add to your max. And so for a lot of those more intermediate and advanced level lifters, they're not advancing in weight every single week, and they're not testing their maxes as often. You may be testing your max, like let's say 2 to 4 times in a year, and you're spending that time between those maxes building out the amount of fatigue that you're building up as far as volume and getting more muscle mass, better technique, honing in your skill with the heavier weights and everything like that. And so you're using these cycles to hit those goals and then get the progress that you want. So that's the benefit of our Positions of Power app and our own programming, and anyone else that's doing programming. That's hopefully what they are doing. You're not trying to do a 1 rep max every single week or every single day. You're not trying to progress weight every single day unless you are a lifter who's in that beginner level. So we do have some beginner level programs, but even here, as kind of like the guideline of the graphs, you can see these blue bars are how we're manipulating the volume. So you can see there's these trends where you're starting with an introductory week, and then let's see, I can even make this bigger. So you're starting with like an introductory week, and then you're stepping up the volume each week, and then you potentially take a deload week, and then you may change phases. So in here, maybe you're changing a phase where these blue bars, see how they're trending downwards because we're bringing the volume down. But if you look at these white line with these blue dots, the intensity is increasing. So now you're transitioning to this higher intensity, lower volume rate place or phase. And then if we go into, let me zoom out and go into some of the in-season training. So let's go into this in-season one. For here again, you can see you may start with an introductory week of lower volume and then build up the volume here during these 3 weeks during the prep phase. And in this case, they are building up the intensity as well. So they're starting with a lower intensity in the introductory week, building it up. And then you go into this development phase, this kind of transition where you're maintaining volume here across. That's less than the peak volume you're doing, but you're continuing to build the intensity. Then you go into this competition phase where now you're bringing down the volume and further increasing the intensity to get ready for that 1 rep max. And this last week here would be like the week of the competition where you're doing very low volume and you're still doing higher intensity. And so you're getting this idea here, this training cycle where you're focusing more on higher volume, lower intensity, and then at the end, higher intensity, lower volume. And you're manipulating those variables in order to continue to progress. Zoom out again. So that's what we have with the Position of Power programs, and what we do with our custom programming is like it depends. If you're farther out from a competition, you may do off-season foundational work, or if you're closer to a competition, you may do the on-season competition phases and max out. And also depending on what kind of frequency you want to do, or if you're a beginner or more advanced, you got the beginner like 2 times per week for each lift. Then you have the intermediate 3 times per week for each lift. And then currently you have the expert, the Taylor Atwood series, where he's doing 3 times per week on squat and bench press, 2 times per week on the deadlift, but also it's much higher volume. So you can kind of see from these bars how much more volume is being pushed, especially later in the phase at the higher intensities. And I believe Jason's going to be working on a in between over here where you're going to get some kind of maybe 4 times a week, but it's not going to be as much volume as this one, as this one is pretty extreme and you have to be really, expert level. You have to have trained for many, many years to where you need this kind of volume to progress. Whereas currently more people fall into this intermediate range and some people even in this beginner range. If they are more self-sufficient, brand new lifter, they want to follow the warm-up plans we have on here, the demonstration of technique and everything like that, hop in the Discord, ask questions, they can get away with the beginner as well. But that's kind of what a lifter like this lifter, Sims, let's call him, just to make the username easier, may have to progress to, is going away from this linear progression on a weekly basis and going to something that's maybe more of a long-term periodization where you're focusing on 16-week, 20-week, maybe 26-week training cycles. And then, getting in and competing. So I think that's everything as far as form checks and going over that question there. Like I said, you can hop into our Discord. Links are in my Instagram bio, King of Lifts Instagram bio, YouTube description, You can always DM me. I'll send it to you. Last time, also what I did, if you missed out last time, did a little bit of donation to this little YouTube campaign that's going on for what's called Team Seas. So they're collecting money to help take garbage out of the ocean. So we're going to do that again. Also, I have that link in the description for you on YouTube. So let me pull up the YouTube video of mine real quick and grab that link too, just in case you're on Twitch. So teamseas.org, pretty easy if you want to go check on your own. And I'll throw it in the chat as well. So it looks like they're about halfway there. So their goal is to remove 30 million pounds by January 1st. And in order to do that, it's, $1 per pound. So they've gotten $14 million and removed 14 million pounds. We did, if I remember correctly, we did 20 doll hairs last time. So we'll do 20 doll hairs again this time. Since there's 3 of you watching the stream right now, plus me is 4. We'll say $5 per person. Now you guys got my phone number. On the same message. I don't have any cool messages for y'all. Now I gotta move it over here off the screen because I'm doing my credit card, and I don't know if any guys gonna steal my credit card information. Let's see, what's my credit card number? With all my millions of dollars, all these YouTube videos, except really like $0 off the YouTube videos. But thank you all still for watching. All right, it's going through. There we go. We add another $20 in there. Positions of power, baby. So they're going till January 1st. So maybe as long as we keep doing these live streams and I get 2 or 3 of you watching, we'll keep throwing some money in there and see how long it takes them to get to 30 million. It's interesting. They started a few weeks ago. And so last week I did the $20 and this week I did the $20 and we're already halfway there. So maybe we won't have to do that many more donations before they hit the 30 million. But if you want to go help out and donate as well, again, links down in the YouTube description, or you can just go to teamseas.org and you can go throw in your money as well. If you want to help me out for doing all these form check videos for you all, you can help me out that way. Let's see if we can get to 30 million pounds of trash removed by January 1st. But I think that's it with a little bit shorter live stream this time because we had less videos to do it. But again, you can always go into our form check, throw in your videos. I hope to do it next time. I have a competition this week on Saturday. So tomorrow I'm driving up to Orlando. And then the following week, I have a competition on Sunday in Orlando. So I'm driving up on Saturday. So I think if I plan and prepare everything, we can do Thursday again next week around the same time between 2 and 3 p.m. or say between 2 and 4 p.m. Eastern time. So that's the plan for now. We shall see if that happens or if I get a little bit too busy and a little bit crazy with everything going on. But let me shut down my screen and we will end it there. Thank you again for all of you for tuning in, throwing in your videos in the Discord. I hope you're all having fun in Discord, chatting with each other. I hope you all are liking these videos of getting something out of it, whether you are actually the person getting form checked or if you're just watching other people and maybe saying, oh, I make that same mistake too, or hey, I do that right and Aaron says it's good. So thank you all again for tuning in and I'll catch you in the next